Boys and girls, welcome to the next episode of the Lion's Den of Leadership podcast, where me, Alex Osenenko, and my co-host, Steve Rozenberg, deconstruct property management entrepreneurs and those who service in the property management community. And we help you all to get better, and both Steve and I are getting better together as well.
We hope.
We surely hope. And we're going to go ahead and interrupt our scheduled programming today because you probably did not expect a Wednesday episode to stream at you. But boys and girls, put your food down. Prepare, sit down in front of the screen. This is going to be a good one because today we're talking property management acquisitions. And we have a very interesting guest who has done, let me tease this out, okay? Who has done over $1 billion in acquisitions for multiple real estate assets, but specifically, he participated and led 10 acquisitions for Mynd Property Management, which equals 7,500 units. I don't know if there's anybody else more experienced in the United States, our beautiful country, that can stake this claim. If anyone has done more acquisitions for more units, please put this in the comments and we can have a healthy argument and a discussion. But our guest today is Vince DeOrio. He is the Director of Mergers and Acquisitions, M&A, at Mynd Property Management. He has more than 10 years experience in real estate acquisitions, and Vince leads the M&A market expansion efforts at Mynd. Now, as I mentioned, he has closed 10 acquisitions, but now I said, Vince, how many deals did you have to look at to close 10? He said over 100. So this is where we're going to start. How do you, what are some of the red flags, Vince? And by the way, Vince, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, guys. Appreciate it.
You got some nice, awesome background. So people are, at some point looking to exit their companies, whether it's going public, whether it's selling, whether it's joining a larger company, or potentially it's a lifestyle business. But for those who are curious, what are some of the red flags or some of the things that disqualified the other 90 deals plus from the 10 you closed?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's we've seen a lot of great companies, but unfortunately there's also just a lot of very messy businesses out there. And I empathize with it because when you're small and growing, you tend to take on anything. It's hard to be disciplined in your growth. And also just as an entrepreneur and starting your business, sometimes you scale quicker than you necessarily could staff. So you may hire a few folks that you wouldn't have hired if it wasn't in time of desperation. So unfortunately, not everybody has not only the expertise, but the ethical background to keep finances allocated properly in an organization. So I would say the number one red flag that we've come across is an employee, whether they're disgruntled or they just don't quite know what they're doing, have mismanagement of owner funds. And as you guys know, the DRE doesn't quite take that lightly.
Wow, that's interesting. So that's number one reason. Wow. So you found in a lot of cases, when you went through due diligence, you found there's some skimming going on.
Yes. Yeah.
Vince, I got a question on that. Do you find that indicative of a system problem or a person problem? Is it a trait of certain size properties, certain type people, certain anything, or is it most of the time they don't even know they're getting ripped off. They don't know they're not doing things correctly. So they have a system problem. Do you find like one overweighing the other?
Yeah, it's a good question. I would say it's mostly been a system problem. Like I like to give people the benefit of the doubt that they're not always ill-intentioned. But as you guys know, it's not, you can't just expect things to all fall into place. You have to have a proper system in place. You have to have checks and balances. And also the principals and the owners of these organizations it's easy to step out, as you know, you guys know. It's some folks treat this as a lifestyle business, and unfortunately, if you're managing 200 units and you've treated it like a lifestyle business, and there's no oversight or no management to assist these other folks that are trying to figure out how to allocate funds and work the systems, it's easy for the machine to break.
Right.
And
Let me ask you this, just as a follow-up with that, when you're talking to these companies and you're bringing in all these, and this may be a little down the road question, but it's been something I've wanted to ask you, how do you do it without grinding too many gears together? Because you're bringing in so many different, type of behemoth, or maybe not behemoth companies, but some big companies. How do you do that and still have them operate? Because you don't want them to just throw up their hands and say, okay, well, we're no longer ABC, we're part of Mynd now, so we're not going to market, we're not going to do this, because that's, I would assume you're kind of, killing yourself. How do you do that and keep the momentum going with that company and still assimilate everything on the back end?
Yeah, it's we've learned a lot from 1 to 10 from our first acquisition to now. Candidly speaking, we were piecing together a playbook on 1 and 2 and 3, and we kind of went through some of those pain points. I think now what's most important for us, so we have an onboarding team, and we engage our operations team very early on. Previously, what we were doing is we were hammering through due diligence, and we were so focused on the close that when close came, that's when the real fun begins. That's when the real work begins.
Yeah.
And at that time, engaging operations and onboarding, it's too late. And so we have systematically, but also there's that fine balance of, you don't want to overwhelm the company that's selling either, right? Like, due diligence is very, it could be very stressful, and you don't want to rattle the staff up too much. You don't want to rattle the owners. So we have found a way to really softly integrate our operations team early on during due diligence, so that when we hit the ground running at day 1, we have a 0 to 120 day game plan. And in that game plan, we have, so we'll probably get to this later on in the podcast, but there's different acquisitions that we do. If it's a true merger where the entire company is joining our organization and the principals are staying on, those principals have direct say in what that 0 to 120 day game plan looks like. And they know their owners and their staff the best. So it's a collaborative effort, and it's really situational, case by case.
Vince, what was the most common reason people went through the dance with Mynd and eventually decided to sell, the offer worked out? Like, what was their reasoning as an entrepreneur, as a business owner, that most stands out? Or is it 10 acquisitions, 10 reasons?
Yeah, can you repeat the last part, Alex?
Is there commonality between the reasons to why people end up selling to Mynd or joining Mynd? Or is there 10 different companies all had their own reasons? Like, is there commonality? Like, I'm just trying to paint a picture for an entrepreneur how to think about exit.
Yeah, no, that's it's been, I would say, about 50%. So probably 4 out of the 10 that we've done have been folks that were literally just looking to retire, and they were looking for a trusted company to take on their contracts and take care of their owners. They had a lot of respect for their owners. They were friends with a lot of they've been managing these assets for 30 plus years. And so their number one, over financial, the economics of the deal, they wanted to make sure that their owners were going to be taken care of. So those were retirees. A couple of other folks had hit a point in their company's growth where they either had to staff up more, take on more, bring on a true HR department, bring on a true corporate accounting team, really beef up their organization to take it from, let's say, 500 units to 1,000 or 1,000 to 2,000. And with that it's not flipping a switch, as you guys know. It takes time and headache. Finding talent in the space can be tough. And they didn't want to just bring their company from 500 to 1,000. They wanted to join a company that was going to bring them from 500 to 100,000. And they saw the horsepower that we could provide from a back office infrastructure and our technology to create more efficiencies that would enable them to potentially step out of some of the day-to-day operations that they were having to wear multiple hats and be more focused on what they love to do, and then leverage our horsepower to get them to the next level.
What are some if there's property management companies watching this and they want to talk to you, what are some things that you recommend before you guys even talk that they should get their house in order with? Like, knowing their numbers, knowing their metrics, knowing their KPIs, but specifically if I was a guy that had 250 properties in my company and I'm a one-man band and I'm doing all this and I'm kind of just getting tired of running on the rat wheel there, and I say, man, this would be good, but I don't want to screw up the meeting with Mynd or with any company. What should I prepare for prior to this meeting so that I walk in kind of with my I's dotted and T's crossed?
Yeah, so I'd say there's probably three things that I tell every company that I talk to. One, just know the competitive landscape. So talk to me, talk to other folks that are acquiring, talk to your peers, understand a general consensus. Granted, everybody has different opinions of valuations, but it is good to understand the competitive landscape. Like if I go sell to a local property management company who's been in the business for 30 years, what are they going to offer me? And if I join with Mynd, what are they going to offer me? And if I go to a business broker, what do they think they could get me? Granted, sometimes too much information is overload, but I always recommend folks to understand the landscape. Two, just from a internal perspective, have some basic things laid out, like your org structure, your employee consensus, potentially, lay out which like job descriptions for each of your staff, because that's something that we look at in all of our acquisitions. We want to retain talent to the extent possible at all times, and understanding your A team and what they do exactly helps us quickly identify if the opportunity is more valuable to us to bring all those folks on. So with an employee consensus and an org structure, you could throw that into a business plan. It doesn't need to be a 30-page extensive business plan, but it shows to the folks that are acquiring, like myself, that you've thoughtfully put something together about your business. You've thought about your growth and your succession planning, and right away, that's going to make me want to apply a higher multiple to your business, because I think that your business is valuable. You take care of your customers, you take care of your tenants, and you understand what you're doing. If I go into a deal and they can't get me a P&L, or they don't have basic things like a property directory, that automatically raises red flags, and it's kind of an uphill battle for me to get my head around why we should value your company on the higher end of the range.
So Vince, would it be a good idea for a prospective company to put together almost like a pitch deck that basically has what you just laid out: org chart with job descriptions, P&L, maybe highlights of the P&L. But what else would be in that pitch deck? Like, give us a couple bullet points. Like, I want some concrete takeaways for the audience.
Yeah, I mean, I would do. I love to learn about business owners and how they started their business. There's these folks have put a lot of time and effort and dedication into building their companies, and I'm always interested to hear about that. It helps us better understand how to structure the deal and what's important to them. So, a little executive summary, like, this is when we started, this is how we've grown. Understanding the org structure, the P&L, their geographic concentration. It's always helpful to maybe see a map of exactly where their assets are located. And again, they can do this internally. You don't have to go out and spend a ton of ton of money to have somebody put this together for you. There's a lot of free services out there that can put together a quick like 3-pager for you. So, you know, just basics of the portfolio, their executive summary, their org chart, and then of course their financials. And then, you know, I do think it's helpful to understand their objectives going into the deal. I'm all about transparency. And the more I understand their objectives, the less back and forth and guessing that we have to do. So one example of that is if you're coming to us and you're saying, my objective is to retire, sell my portfolio, and have as little tax implications as possible in the next 12 months, then we're able to kind of craft a structure that could tailor to that.
Gotcha. So
you could include that in your pitch. You know, if you're looking to grow and you're looking to move, escalate your career and other folks in your organization's career, that could be part of your pitch, almost like you're going out to fundraise.
So what's interesting, Vince, what I'm hearing you say while Alex is taking notes over there, is that it almost sounds like they need to learn how to sell their company. So when they're talking to you, they're basically, and the reason I say that is the consensus that I hear from the property management world, if you will, is kind of like, oh yeah, someone's going to come and they're going to offer me a multiplier, right? They're going to give me a multiplier of this, and if they want it, that's great. But the reality is from what you're telling me is that they kind of need to step in and kind of go, okay, sell us why you should get a higher multiplier or why you should get higher equity or whatever the case may be, but tell us about you and tell us why you feel that you're worth a certain number or a certain, you know, equity or whatever the case may be, where you're almost, which is a different tact than I've heard thus far about what the industry thinks. The industry thinks, oh, this, you know, big money, hedge fund money, VC money is going to come in and they're just going to plop money down and I'm going to say yes or no, and that's it. But you're saying, hey, we want to know more about your company, you. And so that goes to my next question of, do you look at kind of their social media? Do you look at their reviews? Do you look at their Better Business Bureau? Are they
marketing muscle?
Yeah. Do you take that into account? And if it's very strong and very good, do you kind of, I mean, I know obviously everybody's coming over to your brand, but at some point, are you able to leverage that? And I'll use me an example, right? So we have 500 reviews for my company. I think that's a leverageable item to look and go, okay, first of all, how did you get 500 reviews? Because I don't have that many friends. The second thing would be like, okay, is that something that Mynd could use, or is that something that you guys are able to consume and make your own? Is that proprietary, or how does that work?
Yeah, that's a great question that we're always evolving and adjusting our strategy. I think we are of the thesis that let's bring all of the best in class in the space and the best ideas win. Like, we're not sitting here thinking that we have the best ideas throughout the country, especially the industry is different in Houston than it is in New York, than it is in San Francisco or San Diego. So to answer your last question, we want to leverage as much of the brand identity, brand expertise, brand reviews as possible. And we're toying with some ideas on how we can do that and maintain the Mynd brand. So we're very flexible on how we can do that. And we're creative, and we have a smart group of folks here that are thinking through some of that. But when we're looking at a company, I think the reason we do want to understand their social media and their reviews and their connections in the network, because it's helpful for us, but it's also helpful for you as the business owner. I think sometimes folks are too focused on the dollars and the valuation. Maybe they're able to go somewhere else and get a couple $100,000 more, but are they going to be happy? Are their owners going to be happy? And what's the retention going to be like on that portfolio? And so for us, we want to make sure that we're going into this fully understanding who we're partnering with or acquiring, not only for the on our side, but for your side. We want you to be happy coming in with us, because if we acquire you and things go really well, well, when we acquire our next person, which is something I recommend to all of the folks that I'm talking to, get a testimonial. Like, Alex, ask Steve, how is Steve's experience with Mynd? How is it? Talk about the pain points. And if we go into an acquisition and we don't know your culture of your company and your employees and your reputation in the marketplace, and then we onboard you and things go really poorly, well, Steve's not going to be an advocate of Mynd, and then Steve's friend's not going to be an advocate of Mynd, and then pretty soon our brand is diluted throughout the country.
I'm going to add something to this, Steve. This is where I've spent a lot of time creating a formulaic approach to evaluating a brand that hasn't really taken on. And that's a question for Vince. I'll ask in a second. Like, why does he think that is? Because look, if you are acquiring a company, like let's say I'm an acquirer, I'm going to buy a company X with 600 units that has a let's say a 2-year plan that that will take them to 650. Or 670 units. And I'm buying another company with a strong brand, reviews, very strong social media presence, longevity in content, SEO, all kinds of that stuff. They have an internal marketing team and they sort of figure it out. And their trajectory, their plan over the next 2 years is to get to 900. And it's repeatable and historically sort of proven, right? That ramp up will happen. Like, that is a vastly different value proposition for the acquirer. Like, I'm buying the other 600 unit company, but somehow that propagation of brand valuation hasn't really taken in the property management industry. Why do you think that is, Vince?
It's really hard to quantify. I think it's the challenge becomes, yes, there could be good reviews. Yes, there could be good year-over-year growth. Partially that could be attributed to market trends. Partially that could be attributed to one person in the organization. Maybe that principal is a rock star salesperson and they know how to sell their brand, but maybe they don't know how to sell the acquiring company's brand. So for folks acquiring businesses, it's hard to attribute a value to that in the next 12 months. What I've seen and what we've toyed with is, in addition to the valuation of the current business, we have toyed with incentive structures to where if that person is truly confident that they could grow another 300 units in 6 months, we want them to grow. It's good for us, it's good for them. And we could set up an incentive structure to where we acquire the business now, and maybe we have we set up a tail that we look at the business in 6 months. And if they truly hit a hurdle of 300 more units, 400 more units, 500 more units, they should get compensated for that. But for us to put something in perpetuity for growth just doesn't make sense. And it doesn't make sense for anyone who's acquiring businesses. But I think that you will start seeing trends of folks that are growing that want to do that, because part of our strategy is landing and expanding in a market. So if we land with an acquisition, say in Texas, if we could show that we expanded through the brand reputation of that the principal that we partnered with, that is very valuable to us, and we also want them to get compensated for that growth.
Have you purchased, Steve, one second, this is one last question, and on this, I want to sort of don't lose this thread here. Have you purchased, Vince, a company with fully operationalized sales and marketing departments?
That we took on, or right. Yeah, I mean, with our most recent merger with RentVest, they have a full sales and marketing team, and they're in different markets than us right now. So it allows us the ability to let them run their engine and see what's working, and we're running our engine and seeing what's working, and then we're going to combine, and each market's going to have different strategies. So a sales and marketing engine here may not work in another market. So yes, to answer your question, we do consider that in our integrations.
Question. I got 2 questions for you, Vince. So if somebody has a property management company, right, and you're talking to them and they have a full brokerage. So when you say sales, I just want to make sure I understand, sometimes when people say sales, they use that as business developers, and other people use it as realty, not only for property management realty, but realty outside of their company that they're just doing retail sales. Mm-hmm. When you're doing that, how do you evaluate, or how do you take into account the realty sales? Is that you chop it and say, we're not doing that? Or because it may not be part of the evaluation of the company, but it is part of the revenue that's brought into the company. And so what's the company line on something like that is my first question.
Yeah. How do you look basically recurrent revenue versus one-time home sales revenue? Right, Steve?
Yeah. So we're currently not acquiring the brokerage businesses. We're not doing brokerage right now. Our preference is to align with brokers across the country and have that referral relationship. So in the instance that a company, which we've come across, is doing both sales, true brokerage services, buying and selling homes or investment properties, and doing property management, we acquire their property management company, and then on a case-by-case basis, we figure out what to do with their brokerage. In some instances, we let them continue to operate brokerage as a separate entity from Mynd, and then they're our preferred broker in that region, and we have a structure set up for that. And then in other cases, it's just, we have done 10, but that's not a huge sample set, right? So I'm working with the limited data that we've done in deals, and there has been cases that it was a broker who just ended up managing properties, and they ended up selling us their contracts and going back to their business of brokerage. So in that case, they just continue to operate as they were previously, and then they become a referral engine for us.
Now, let me ask you this though, and this may just be because you guys have only done, I say only, but you guys have done 10. Again, just my perspective is that if you're looking at a company and they do sales, right? They do realty, they do sales, and they're helping their investors buy more properties, so the acquisition cost goes much lower because they've already acquired the client, and they're just educating their clients. Like we do an owner education series, something like that, where you're trying to get your clients to purchase more properties. But you're saying under Mynd, they wouldn't have that option because they're not part of a brokerage anymore, or how does that work?
No, we don't, no. So yeah, sorry if I wasn't clear on that. We want them to still operate their brokerage to the extent that it makes sense for the deal. We're not going to bring them on to run a region for us and let them do brokerage. But if they say, we want to just go do brokerage and still have access to our clients, we give them that ability. Gotcha. And I think also to piggyback on that, what's attractive for folks that are doing just true brokerage is as we grow our footprint, we're at about a little over 8,000 units now, which all of our owners, they are investors and they're buying and selling across the country. And if we're working with a broker here in the Bay Area and they sell their contracts to us, well, guess what? Now they become a preferred broker for us in the area. And not only do they have access to their clients that they sold to us, but we have hundreds of clients that they now have first look at.
Okay. I want to ask about some of the mechanics of the acquisition itself, Vince.
Can I ask my last question?
Go ahead, please.
Sorry. And by the way, a good friend of mine I think he's in Yakima, Enrique Hovens.
Yeah.
Just a shout out that he said that the transition was smooth, said it worked great, said it was everything we said. So hats off to you guys, because he was, he's very experienced. He's an investor. He owns, I think, about 100 properties of his own. And he said everything they said they did. Great transition. They let me run my ship. And so far it's been great. So that was a conversation I had speaking at an event, and hats off to you guys on that.
Thank you.
But going to that, what do you do if you get a disgruntled person? How does and I get the legal aspect, I get all that, but that could spoil everything, right? I mean, it could spoil that whole pot right there if you get a toxic owner that all of a sudden, they do it on emotion. Next thing you know, they're just saying, wait a second, now it's running great. I don't have these problems. Obviously they forget all the drama that they had down the road. And now they're saying, I want this back. How do you deal with in that kind of scenario, or have you dealt with that yet?
We haven't dealt with that yet. We have not dealt with that yet. And it's something that is it's bound to happen. I think that setting expectations and having very clear communications up front is by far, in my opinion, the most important thing of doing these deals. If any time during the, call it, year that I'm cultivating this relationship, getting to know them, I mean, to your point about Enrique, he's a friend of mine now. I know his family. I think it's important to understand the person. If you get any red flags of a volatile personality or a volatile kind of in and out, I think it's important to sit down and have that conversation with that person and fully set the expectations, because we have the legal documents that are going to protect us and protect them. But you don't want, to your point, you don't want someone in the marketplace feeling poorly about something. So luckily, knock on wood, we have not experienced that yet. But I hope that.
Yeah, I know that, I relate that too. I know some people that have done a lot of the syndications and apartments and other stuff like that on the investing side. And, you get a toxic partner in a deal, and it ruins the deal for everyone, because all of a sudden now they're angry, they're upset, they're bad mouthing. They're, like you said, you get someone who's not happy. And I was just curious how I can only imagine being more upfront and setting better expectations as you go. Because look, it's bound to happen, right? It's bound to be the case where you get someone, then they say, even though if you do everything you say you're going to do, it's all on paper, it's written out, it's disclosed, it's all that, they're still not happy, right? And they say, well, I want more, this and that. And you don't want them bad mouthing, and all of a sudden they're, I'm assuming there's a clawback clause and all those things, but I'm assuming you don't want them tainting your name in a market. And I was just curious if you guys have dealt with that yet, because like you said, I'm sure it's going to happen, but it'll probably, I guess if you can control the narrative prior to that, the more you can get the dirty laundry up front out of the way, it probably would help, I would imagine.
Yeah, and I mean, we have dealt with disgruntled employees. I think they're probably the ones that that are the most sensitive up front, right? They didn't get a big payout. They liked kind of doing what they were doing previously. And we have inherited some awesome people who have escalated their careers and really love being with us. But we have inherited some people that weren't so happy about the transition, and they didn't believe in our technology or our systems, or, they felt we were too big, just because we have 8,000 units, and they didn't think that was like a business that they wanted to be in. So that person could be very toxic in an organization, because they might have relationships in the company, and then before you know it, they're kind of a cancer in the organization. And so what we spend a lot of time doing is understanding every employee that we may inherit. We're very clear and transparent with them. If they're going to have a role, we talk through that role with them. And if they're not going to have a role, we give them ample notice. And it's worked out to some extent. We've had some situations where an employee left and may have taken some clients with them, which I think, everybody who's acquired a portfolio worries about. And yeah, it's kind of
I think the fear is probably minimal compared to the reality of what they could do compared to how many, and again, I just go back to, I know other people that have done acquisitions, and they were afraid the property manager who's been a property manager for 20 years with these clients, and they say, man, if they leave, they're going to take all my clients, and maybe 3 go, when they leave. And it's like, okay, it wasn't as bad. So the fear of it is a lot worse than the reality of it. That's my guess. I could be wrong during that.
Now you go with some stoicism philosophy there, Steve, because that's exactly what stoicism teaches. Right. A lot of times our anxiety and fear prevents us from acting, with clear conscience and focusing on the problem rather than just being so worried and concerned. So a thumbs up on being a stoic learner, I guess a follower, but. Vince, were you going to close this point out? Because I want to get in the I want to get in the weeds and the gears of the acquisition. Like, I can't wait to get in there. So go ahead and close this out.
One thing on that is, if you're providing a good service, and like, it's hard to, if you have a disgruntled employee who may be poaching clients, that's one thing. But if you're providing a good service, 9 times out of 10, the owner, they care about the service and quality of customer service that you're providing them. So that would just be my one piece of advice, is not to worry so much.
I agree. I think it's one of those things. It's kind of like asking for reviews. A lot of people don't ask for reviews because they're afraid of what someone may say. You're afraid of like, man, what do people think about me? And the reality is, if you actually ask for reviews, unfortunately, you probably property managers in general probably deal with the 10% of the upset people. There's 90% of the people that are very happy. And all of a sudden you're pleasantly surprised by what people say about your company if you just ask. But it's the fear of the 10% that makes you not even ask for that review because you're concerned about it. So, but Alex, I'll let you ask your next.
All right, so let's get into some stats. Let's give our audience a bit of ammunition for their future adventures in acquiring or being acquired. Business brokers, right? I want to bring that up. So typically, a lot of small businesses are being represented and sold through business brokers. I have not seen that as a trend in the property management industry, probably because the business is very different. There's multiple constituencies, blah, blah, blah. But in your experience, Vince, out of the total 100 deals you looked at, how many were actually being participated or being put together by business brokers?
0.
Do you know why? Like, you've done other acquisitions of other asset types. A, how do those compare to property management? B, are those more of a field where business broker will play in? Or just give us a little bit more color on the whole topic.
Yeah, and I shouldn't just say 0. So I've looked at more than 100. I'd say 100 have been brought into the table with strong consideration. We've looked at many more than 100 that were represented by a business broker. And I think similar, what we've found, and I would love there to be more of a marketplace that we could have a trusted source of a platform that we could go look at opportunities and property management companies could go. But what we found is, once they go to a business broker, pricing expectations typically are unrealistic. And so as a result, what we've seen, and at least in the markets that we're looking at, there's very few opportunities that are being represented by a business broker, and the ones that are being represented by a business broker have been recycled through the chain and passed on for a variety of reasons. So yeah, I think, it's hard to relate it to like a real estate MLS almost. You have an MLS of real estate deals that are on the market and they're represented by a sell side agent, and then me as the buyer will have a buy side agent, and they represent us in good faith, but we have transparent information into the piece of real estate that we're buying. A lot of times the businesses don't have that information at hand, to the earlier point that we discussed. So some of the information was pieced together by the business broker, and what I've encouraged business owners to do, it's as if you or and I were to go to start a business, but we were to hire an external party to write our business plan, that we're missing out on the real reason why we're starting a business. Like, we should be writing our business plan. We should be going through our financials. We shouldn't have somebody else come do it for us, because it doesn't tell the whole story. So I've seen that in some cases with business brokers, it's not the right story. The financials aren't right. It's been recycled through. And as a result, it's just been a pass for us.
It's kind of just desensitized. It's kind of been sanitized so much that it's almost cleansed, and it's, just a white sheet, and there's no personality or emotion when you're dealing. It's kind of like, sometimes when you're dealing with an agent, they're non-emotional, which they should be, but also they're not getting conveyed the message that maybe an owner of a company could give when they're trying to talk. And I don't know what an owner can or cannot be involved in when a business broker is involved, but that's what I think about, is that it's so sanitized, it's just non-emotional. You're just a number on a wall, and if it fits, great. If not, no worries.
That's a very good point, Steve. Actually, that like hits it on the head. There's so much more to the business than just the piece of paper. There's the personalities, there's the relationship, the friendship that you're hopefully going to cultivate. And none of that is taken into consideration by having a hard and fast number. I would say that through discovery process of having the ability to work with the business owner, and I'm not just saying this to pump us up, but it's probably got that business owner a higher valuation than they would have if it would have just been a business broker. And I shouldn't say higher valuation, but better structure. If I'm able to talk to the business owner and understand their true needs, which is something that I pride myself on, is working with entrepreneurs to craft a solution that is a win-win. That is not, you can't do that through a business broker. It's too challenging.
Right. And now, I guess just as a follow-up to that question, do you think that as this industry matures, because I think it's more adolescent and it's maturing in this industry as far as acquisitions and mergers, the average property manager age, I believe, is 59 years old, right? So you've got older people that are retiring, you've got younger people coming in, and you've got a lot of people doing acquisitions. As we said, there's other people doing mergers and acquisitions and other variations. Do you see that becoming more prevalent in the future? Because it's going from the mom and pop scenario to the business model scenario, which means, more people are going to want to come in and sanitize it. It's kind of like, to me, it reminds me of like, a lot of the vendors out there, they're providing services that the softwares don't provide. And so you've got the Property Melds, the Citizen Home Solutions, you got all these people that are providing services that are needed in the industry. And so I wonder if that's going to be something that's going to be needed, that they're going to come in and they're going to lift up as that, maybe get better at it. It's maybe a very raw, rudimentary version now, but do you see that as something that's going to start coming into the market more?
Hard to say. I think the size of the acquisition, just the general landscape of the property management industry, I think it's probably like, it's not a traditional, you're not going to have a bunch, it's not large enough for iBankers to come in and have see the true opportunity of brokering these opportunities. So I think what you'll see is a lot of potential real estate brokers who may do business brokerage on the side. You might see some of that trickle in, but to have a sophisticated true engine for business brokerage of property management companies, I don't see it happening in the near future. I definitely could be wrong. And I think it could use it, but I think you would need the business brokerage community would need to take it more seriously and not just do it as a side thing and sell a gas station and sell a property management company. I think it would need to be a dedicated person towards management.
Here's my thoughts on this, though. Let's just say the first wave or first round is going to be a lot, and I hate to call them mom and pops, but let's just say the older generation, the smaller, the 50 doors, 100 doors, a lot of those, maybe they get swept up, right? And they become 500 doors, 1,000 doors, 2,000 doors. The second wave coming could be more of, okay, this is actually pretty legitimate. These are all these people are in line. Now we got companies, instead of there being 1,000 property management companies in the city that each manage a few, maybe now there's 100. And now those 100 represent a large portion, and those are all running as businesses. And so the second wave could be like, okay, this is actually a legitimate business that requires those types of things. It's not the mom and pops running it as a hobby, running it as a lifestyle. They're running it as a business model. And that second or maybe third wave, I don't know where it is, at some point, they're going to keep getting consumed to where it's like the airlines, right? There's going to be 3 or 4 major airlines that exist. Prior to deregulation, there were 50 airlines that existed. Now there's 4. And so the acquisitions get bigger and bigger as they keep rolling up and rolling up. And so that's what I wonder, if as the industry keeps rolling up, it starts getting more legitimized. That's a word, I'm not sure, but I made it up. So it starts getting more legitimate. And now all of a sudden that all these companies are rolling up bigger and bigger, the numbers are bigger. And all of a sudden, like you said, more eyeballs are put on it saying, okay, this is not a quilted blanket. This is a force now. And there's a lot of revenue in this force. And like you said, you're not dealing with people that don't understand social media. They don't understand P&Ls. Now you've got a company that is managing 10,000 doors, and they say, yeah, we'll partner, or we'll be acquired by you that you manage 50,000 doors. So that's a different conversation than someone who manages 50 doors. Do you see it? Do you like, I guess my question to you is do you think that there's a sequential wave that happens? And I'll use me being a pilot, I'll use that as the industry. I know that the airline industry went through that same wave. And that's what it seems to me like is happening here.
Yeah, I think I could see a world where that happens. And also, I think, just speaking for myself and Mynd, we want to position ourselves to be the go-to for you. So, and the reason you need a business broker is to help the organization of the flow of the sale of your business, to get you market value for your business. And if we are able to provide that to you internally, then hopefully we're your go-to. But to your point, I could see a trend where as conglomerates are getting bigger, they might need a representation to go out in the market for them.
And just for the record, I probably went on a tangent. I wasn't actually even thinking about the business broker anymore. I was just thinking about the standardization of acquisitions as it matures in this industry. You know, like if let's just look, there's always a bigger fish, right? Somebody could come to you and say, hey, look, you guys have 100,000 doors, Mynd. We want to buy you. That's a different conversation than you're talking to somebody with 1,000 doors or 500 doors, right? So there's always a bigger fish. And so there's going to be other people. It may not get to that yet, but at some point it will get to that point, right? There are going to be bigger people that want to make those acquisitions. And it's not I guess my question to you is do you see the industry going that way, of the smaller mom and pop type organizations kind of evaporating or getting consumed and rolled up into bigger companies where there are no more 50 property doors. There are no more real estate agents managing 20 properties, right? That just doesn't exist. It's kind of like somebody creating an airline that wants to fly to 2 cities. Doesn't exist. It's not optional. Prior to deregulation, that would happen. Now, not the case. So do you see the industry going that way?
You know, and I'll just give you my personal opinions on that, just speaking candidly. I don't see a world where small business owner doesn't have an opportunity anymore. Like, I think we're proponents of small business owners and entrepreneurs, and I think there's always going to be a need for that, right? Like, we aren't a company that every client is a fit for, right? There's certain niches in every industry that requires a certain type of property manager. And there's some really rock star property managers out there that I think are excellent operators at the scale that they're at, and they should continue operating at that scale because there's a need for their service. And I think there will always be a need for their service. I think what you will see diminish, my hope is you'll see diminish, is poor quality operators, and all of, like, we are raising the bar to property management across the country. So the people that are surviving is not a size thing, whether it's us at 100,000 units or someone who's at 200 units, but the quality of service has increased.
So standardization will come up.
Yeah. So like, I think naturally folks that are managing 50 units on the side may fizzle out because they're not providing a great service. But, you know, the mom and pop who's managing 200 units, they're going to continue to kick butt and they'll continue to operate.
So I think the key word there is on the side, because I think that's what hurt this industry. That's why, you know, out of 10.8 million individuals who own 1 to 4 unit properties, rental real estate, you know, 65% or close to 7 million don't use a property manager because of that crap. because of the side, because the industry for like 50 years was in the back rooms of real estate offices, barely surviving, starved for resources. And of course, investors lost trust in this side thing. So I think what I want to see is the side business operators getting integrated into more purposeful companies. And I think, Steve, that's what we're seeing. But I think I agree with Steve as well. There are waves of that. There's also folks who run 5 to 6, 700 unit shops, maybe even 4,000, that see a larger opportunity. And I'm a founder, I'm a small business owner, Steve, you are too. It's very difficult to scale small business without capital. Very, very difficult. You have to say no. Like this, your no muscle needs to be like Steve's biceps. Like you have to say no to a lot of different things, stay focused, and hope the opportunity cost of you saying no is not going to come and bite you back in the butt. Because what if you say no to the wrong thing, right? What if you focus on this unit growth and that ends up being the losing strategy because there's a sell-off next year or something like that, right? Rather than you maybe potentially creating a service angle to service more. In your case, Steve, like, are you better served throwing your resources right now at growing more units, or is it placing more VAs because you built that infrastructure in Mexico? Answer me that question. I bet you don't have an answer for that.
I don't think it's an or, I think it's an and. I think it's a matter of leveraging your team and scaling out.
But correct. But now you're putting together a virtual assistance company that requires its own marketing, its own business plan, its own operations, its own workflows. You and Pete back to the drawing board, figuring that out. Now, what happens to your core business? Somebody quits, something happens, you know what I mean? It's the opportunity cost, no matter what. You cannot do those two things because you'll do one of them well, and the other will be there as well.
Well, I think that boils down to just kind of, I'll say kind of like what Mynd's doing. To me, it's one of those things when you're growing a business is if somebody can do it 80% as good as you, that's good enough. And because nobody is ever going to do it as good as me in my mind, right? But if I can get 5 people to do something that I want to do, and I've leveraged that out over 5 people. So for example, we'll talk about sales, right? BDM. In my mind, nobody could be the best BDM as me, right? Pete may disagree, but I'll say that I'm the best BDM in the world. I can close anyone on a deal. But now I have 3 salespeople. I've got a sales manager. So are they doing as good as me? No, they're actually doing better, because when you scale that out, if I get hit by a bus tomorrow, if I'm down in Rio de Janeiro and I get hit by a chicken bus, right? What happens to Empire sales? It keeps going. It doesn't affect me at all. So the question is I think what you're going to is are you building a job or are you building a business? And if I am the guy who has to do that all, Richard Branson, I think he has like 400 businesses. He spends 3 hours a day on his laptop in Necker Island working in his business, and then he's done with 400 businesses. How does he do that? He does that by putting the right people in place and leveraging those people. So to have 2 businesses, 3 businesses, 5 businesses, I think it's a matter of putting the right people in place and leveraging those people, in my opinion.
That's very well said. Very well said. And I believe this in concept. However, when the reality hits you in the ass as a business owner, like what you just said, yeah, you wanted 3 people, a sales manager. What if your sales manager gets hit by a chicken bus? And at the same time, your BDM has a baby and your ops guy, let's say, gets married and out on honeymoon for 3 weeks. Like, that's a small business reality.
Well, it is. But then it goes back to me. I would say it goes back to, do you have your systems, policies, and procedures in place to be able to replicate that role and get someone trained and up to speed? So then to me, it'd be like, what is the training procedure? What is the time frame to get someone up to speed? What are their metrics? And what is it, is it a 30-day training? Is it a 90-day? The biggest challenge why people put on the cape or the heroitis and they want to run the company themselves, the reality is they don't know how to duplicate themselves and have the systems in place, and it puts a spotlight on them and on their weaknesses. That's why people don't use virtual assistants, because they go, oh, I don't really know how to do that, so I'll just do it myself. Get out of my way. No one can do it as good as me. The reality is they haven't systematized it and scaled it. They don't have a business. They have a job. And so to me, if I have to jump back in and I have to keep nurturing it, there's one thing to jump back in and fix it. There's another thing if I jump back in because I want to put on my cape and be the hero, and I want to say no one can do it as good as me. That's an ego thing. I don't think that's a business model thing. And a lot of people don't create these systems because they will self-sabotage it. I think they self-sabotage their own businesses because they want to feel needed. They want to feel like they want to be there. And so going, back to the mind thing is, would they self-sabotage? And that's kind of where I was going earlier. Would they self-sabotage a deal because they go, wait a second, if Mind has this and Mind has that, what do I do with my life? Where am I involved? So it sounds like what Mind has done is they've said, look, you've got a place here, you've got a place here, and you've got a place here. Your option. We can fill all these for you. And I think that's what people want. But again, as an operator owning a property management company, I would say sometimes you're so busy putting out fires, and it's a reactionary industry, right? All we do is we react, right? We're not proactive. Someone calls, you react. Somebody files a complaint, you react. My thing is if you had the systems in place to go upstream, you wouldn't be reacting, you'd be proactive. And you would get these problems before they happened. And if you had the proper systems and procedures in place, that phone call would never happen. So the chicken bus scenario, if my sales manager gets hit by the chicken bus, I feel bad for him, but we can replace him because we have the systems, policies, procedures in place. And you hire the role, not the person. So if you're hiring the person who's going, well, that guy's kind of he doesn't really talk to people very well, so we're going to work around him. That's not a duplicatable or a scalable system. It's got to be, what is the role? What does that role do? And how does that role be duplicatable and scalable? I mean, do you agree, Vince?
This is our next mental safari that you and I are going to embark on next time we have beers. And this is going to be hours, days, maybe months. But I can tell you just what, I'm going to clip it and then we're going to close this out, give Vince a chance. But here's how I'm going to clip it. I'm going to clip your wings, okay? Your big, beautiful wings, your big wings. Here's how I think there's a difference between running and scaling the business. You can run the business with systems and have a really good predictable growth versus scaling, which is what Brett Sugars is talking about. 2x, 10x, 5x, 20x. That takes brain concentration, brain power. That takes both founders constantly working deals on businesses' behalf. Like, you got to do biz dev, Steve. You can't be going out there speaking, doing bigger pockets. Bigger pockets is important. Maybe that's the piece you keep. But like, you got to do biz dev deals. Like, maybe there's something you can do with Mind. Maybe there's other companies you can partner up. Maybe you can go do acquisitions on your own. Like, that's scaling business versus marketing business.
The only thing I'll say, and my rebuttal, is that every business has a visionary and an integrator, and you got to keep your line. And so no successful business in history, Southwest Airlines, Microsoft, GM, doesn't matter. They all had a visionary and they had the integrator. So for example, with my company, I'm the visionary, Pete's the integrator. You don't hear about the integrator, but the integrator, like Pete, is the guy who's actually running the operation. I'm the face guy of the company. I'm the guy who's out there. But when people want to know the nuts and bolts, I go, you need to talk to Pete because he's actually the one who's running the operation. So I think any successful business it cannot be a one-man show. You have to, if you're going to be one or the other. You are not going to be both, without a doubt. You have to let your ego be big enough, like Pete. Pete's ego is big enough to say, you know what? Steve's the guy who's going to be out in front. I'm really not going to be out in front. No one's really going to know who I am. They know who he is because of NARPM and all that stuff. But for any successful business, and Vince, you tell me if I'm wrong, I think they have to have both of those roles, and they have to stay in their lanes, most importantly.
To be continued. To be continued. Vince, please close us out. Tell folks who are listening or in recording or live, if they're interested to, get and start conversation with Mind to potentially build the relationship or actually ready to sell, how would they go about finding you?
Yeah, you guys, could reach out to me direct. It's vincent.deorio@mind.co. You can find my info on the website and also my LinkedIn. So I'm out there. I would say that you could come to me not just for if you're interested in selling. Like I'm a firm believer of being completely open and an open book with folks. I think it's healthy. And I actually learn from a lot of these conversations. So if you just want to sit down and chat about, hey, what could my business be worth? I'm not even thinking about selling. My son's going to take over the business, but I want to know how much my business is worth. I could sit down with you in a half an hour and talk through what we would pay for it and what we're seeing in the industry. So I would highly encourage any of you to reach out to me directly, even if you have no intention of selling. And I'm happy to share my stories with you. And I think the more transparent we could be with each other, I think the better. So
knowledge is power, man. Knowledge is power.
It is. I love talking. I honestly, I love hearing everyone's story about how they started their business. Like, small business is hard. It's very hard. And I come from a family of entrepreneurs, and I really respect folks who have built something from nothing, and always interested to just hear their stories. So I appreciate you guys having me on the podcast, and I could sit with you for another hour and talk about 1,000 other things, but I hope this was helpful.
This is very helpful. I think Mynd is lucky to have you, Vince. I think you are, if the organization is anything like you, I think that's a refreshing and a breath of fresh air for the industry as a whole, and all of us included here. So
I appreciate that.
Hope that was extremely useful to all of you. You can reach out to Vince for your private valuations and conversations as well. He's a pleasant fella, as you probably saw. Steve, you and I, to be continued, brother.
Absolutely. Hey guys, and everyone, thanks for watching. Appreciate it. Again, go to our Facebook group, The Sphere of Influence. You can join there. We talk a lot of entrepreneurs on there. So if you want to join, go there. Also, this podcast, as well as the other ones, are on iTunes. Go to iTunes, you can download it. We only ask that you share it with other people, especially this particular episode is very good for the industry. And again, we just want, Alex and I do this out of the goodness of our heart because we want to give back to the industry and help it become a better place. So Vince, thank you again for your time. Alex, as always, buddy, we will, over beers, we will discuss this in depth. I guarantee you.
The winner will be announced later. All right, boys and girls, much love to you. Have a great
day.
Bye, guys. We'll see you.
Bye.
Bye.